This segment is about process metrics, and specifically the idea of lagging and leading indicators. So by lagging indicator, I mean result, output, effect. By leading indicator, drivers, the inputs, the causes. Now we've all heard this phrase, manage it by measuring it. And in the context of process and of metrics, it's if we measure the lagging indicators, we can manage it. The interesting thing about that mindset, in my view, is that it says that if we apply the right combinations of carrots and sticks, reward and punishment, if you will, the people in the organization will figure out how to get the desired result, output, or effect that we want. And that's possible. Lots of smart people in your organization, and if you apply those two things, they'll work out the result that we want. The other school of thought says that, yes, we need to measure the result, keep track of the scorecard. But we want to understand what are the leading indicators, what are the drivers of the input or causes, and measure those also. Now, to do this requires that we lift our veil of ignorance out of what happens in the process. Because if we don't understand what the leading indicators are, it means that in fact we don't understand our process. Or let's put it this way, you have your version of what the leading indicators are. I have mine, she has hers. They're based on my interpretation of the facts, your interpretation of the facts, my bias, my experience, your experience, etc. I'd call this sort of management by superstition when you really get down to it. So the only way for a leader and an organization to say that I want to determine the leading indicators and measure those is to in fact understand the process. And mathematically, that's the famous phrase, y, the result, the output, the effect, is a function of one or more x's, a finite number of x's. And in fact, creating an algorithm. There's all this hype today about algorithms, but in fact, the idea of an algorithm to understand a phenomena goes back at least to the 5th century, if not earlier. In fact, the root of that word, algorithm, comes from Greek and Latin and is named after a Persian mathematician. So to understand that algorithm, though, means that we must now understand our process. And when we understand the vital few x's, it means we understand the specific drivers, inputs, and causes, and now we can measure those as well as this. And now managing it by measuring it takes a very different meaning, because now we're measuring and managing these things. And I would argue that in managing and measuring these leading indicators, we are talking about prediction, about insight. When we're just managing and measuring lagging indicators, we're in reaction mode, and very often in suspense to see how things turn out. I think a lot of the focus of management on the lagging indicators only probably comes from several centuries worth of accounting, where you close the books at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, and it's always the result financially, as opposed to thinking about the leading indicators of the process. So I think that habit just got adopted unconsciously into the world of running things, of execution, of process. And so there's been a neglect of really understanding that, how the process actually works in our organization, so we can properly identify and measure these leading indicators.